what do the living owe the dead?
Ooh, that's a big one.
Yeah, that's the question we're going to try to get at today.
I like it.
So, welcome everybody to the Bookish Breakdown YouTube channel. I'm Lem.
And I'm Abby.
And if you like this deep dive, please hit that like button and subscribe.
Yeah, do it. Help us out.
So we're going to be talking today about the Tri-State Crematory case. Very disturbing stuff. What happened, when it happened, who was involved.
We're going to try to break it down, give everybody all the information piece by piece, in a respectful way, of course.
Sure.
And we're using, audio excerpts from the Noble podcast as our source material.
Yeah. So this all starts in Noble, Georgia.
Noble, Georgia.
February 2002 at the Tri-State Crematory.
And the story breaks with a pretty horrifying discovery, right? We've got two EPA agents, Robin and Larry.
Right.
They're on the Marsh property. Now, they're there because a neighbor had called in, said something's not right.
Suspicious activity?
Yeah, seeing some things. And it doesn't take them long to stumble across something truly awful.
A human skull.
Yeah, just lying there out in the open.
I can't even imagine.
Oh, I can't even fathom. So, of course, this gets the JBI involved right away. Special Agent Greg Ramey gets called to the scene. And even he's seen some things.
Right.
But his first reaction is like disbelief.
Yeah, it's got to be a joke, right?
This can't be real. This is not happening.
Yeah, no, this is way too crazy.
But unfortunately, it's very real.
Yeah, so it goes from a skull to an entire body.
Yeah.
Partially mummified.
Elderly black gentleman, just in a cardboard box.
And a cardboard box,
Right.
just left out.
And I don't know if this makes it worse or more heartbreaking, but when they open the box, a mouse runs out of the man's suit coat.
Oh, gosh. That's just adding insult to injury.
It's awful. And Ramey, he observes Brent Marsh, the guy who runs the crematory.
Right.
He's just standing there, and he looks scared.
Like a deer in headlights.
Totally. And this is just the beginning. As they continue to investigate, they start finding more and more remains.
So it's not just, one or two. No, this is a lot.
Scattered in the woods, they find more. And then there's this building, the Butler building. They get to the door, and they can't even open it.
It's blocked.
It's blocked by bodies.
Oh my God.
The building's literally filled to the brim. So at this point, the news starts to spread through Noble, this small, close-knit community, and people are horrified.
That's got to be just devastating.
Right. Like, this is not just some faraway news story. This is happening in their backyard. And to make things even more complicated, the Marsh family, they're not just some random newcomer.
Oh, they're very deeply rooted in this community.
Generations.
Yeah.
Their history goes way back. We learn from Stan Porter, a neighbor, and actually a relative of the Marshes, that Brent's great-grandfather, Monroe Marsh, actually founded the New Home Baptist Church.
Wow.
And this Monroe Marsh, he was born into slavery.
So their connection to Noble goes, further back than almost anybody, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just the church either.
No.
Brent's father, Ray Marsh, ran the general store.
Right.
Which, from what I've heard, it was a very central place in the community.
It sounds like it. I mean, Stan was talking about boxing matches there, gatherings that were almost like an Elks Lodge, very fraternal, and then these Rays on the Lake parties.
Zach's a fun guy.
Yeah.
So they're not just like living there, they're hosting the community in their spaces.
Exactly. They're interwoven into the fabric of this town.
Right. And then we've got Brent's mother, Clara.
Yeah, a beloved teacher. For 4 decades, she taught in Noble, so everybody knew her.
Wow.
She was involved in a lot of community things, and this is where things get a little tricky because people have wondered, she lived right there.
Right there.
How could she not have known?
Yeah.
I mean, how is that even possible? But she always maintained that her husband's business was his own.
So, she's saying that she was completely in the dark.
Exactly. And it's hard to know for sure. But as the investigation unfolded, Clara, along with Ray and Brent's sister, they actually got arrested. Yeah. On charges of falsifying death certificates.
Wow.
But those charges, they ended up getting dismissed. And we know that Ray, he was really sick, starting around 1996.
Right.
He had multiple strokes, he had dementia, so it seems unlikely that he was really aware of what Brent was doing.
In 1996, that's when Brent took over the crematory.
Exactly.
So that seems like a really key turning point in the whole story, right? Like maybe that's when things really started to go wrong.
Yeah, potentially. And this is where GBI Special Agent Greg Ramey, he really gets deeply involved in all of this. And his position was very complex because he also had deep family roots in Noble.
Right. So this wasn't just some random case for him.
Absolutely not. This was personal. And what makes it even more complicated is that at the time, Georgia didn't actually have a law against corpse desecration.
So how did they even prosecute Brent?
Well, they had to get creative. The charge they ended up bringing against him was theft by deception.
So they basically argued that families paid for cremations that never actually happened.
Right, they were deceived. And you can imagine the public response to all of this. The GBI, they were getting inundated with calls.
People trying to figure out if their loved ones were involved.
Yeah, over 600 calls a day. And the recovery operation, it was just massive. I mean, they had to bring in so many resources.
That's a huge undertaking.
Oh, absolutely. They had to set up a no-fly zone over the property.
Really?
Yeah. The FAA actually implemented that.
Wow.
And the governor, he declared a state of emergency.
Gosh.
It was a huge deal. And during all of this, Ramey actually had a really interesting conversation with Brent. He urged him to provide some kind of explanation, to try to make sense of all of this, because otherwise, he said, you're going to be seen as a monster.
Right. And they were getting no answers from Brent at all.
No, nothing. And what's really unsettling is that before the story even broke, there were people in Noble who had seen things.
Like they had noticed some really weird stuff going on.
Yeah, and one of those people was Gerald Cook, who was a gas delivery driver.
Okay.
And he had been going to the crematory property, as part of his job.
Make deliveries.
Yeah, routine deliveries. And back in October of the year 2000, so like a year and a half before the whole thing blew up.
Wow.
He saw body parts just lying around out in the open.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Just left out.
Yeah. And it gets even creepier because Gerald remembered something from his childhood. Ray Marsh, Brent's dad, had made this really disturbing comment about how he had to cremate a body piece by piece because it had too much fat.
That's terrible.
I know, right? And you can tell that this memory really stuck with Gerald. He was scared. He didn't want to get involved.
Right.
So he just tried to pretend like he hadn't seen anything.
But he did tell his boss about it.
He did. And his boss reported it to Sheriff Steve Wilson.
So it's not like nobody knew. But it seems like nobody really knew what to do.
Well, Sheriff Wilson, he actually said later that he regretted not acting on that information sooner. But he also pointed out that the community in general, they didn't really know what went on at the crematory.
It's not something you think about every day.
No, it's not. And then, enter McCracken Poston, Brent Marsh's defense attorney.
This guy is like a legend.
Oh, he's definitely got a reputation.
He'd run for Congress in 1996 and lost pretty badly.
Yeah.
But he was known for taking on these really difficult, high-profile cases, like Alvin Ridley, the Zenith man.
Oh, yeah, that case was huge. Ridley was accused of keeping his wife captive for, decades.
Crazy.
But McCracken, he uncovered all these diaries that the wife had kept, and it turned out she wasn't being held captive at all. She had this whole, alternate life going on.
Wow.
So Ridley ended up getting exonerated, and McCracken's career, it just exploded after that.
He became the go-to guy for these impossible cases.
Exactly.
So when Brent Marsh needed a lawyer, McCracken was the one who got the call.
In February of the year 2002, and you can imagine the backlash he faced.
Oh, yeah.
People were furious. They couldn't believe he would represent this guy.
It's one thing to defend someone accused of holding their wife captive.
Right.
It's another thing to defend the guy who's, letting bodies pile up.
Exactly.
And this was in his hometown, too. Everybody knew him.
Yeah, and he actually even mentioned remembering Brent's father, Ray, from back when McCracken worked as a gravedigger.
Really?
Yeah, so there was this personal connection, however distant.
Wow.
And the public anger was so intense. I mean, the bond hearings for Brent, they had to have armed guards there.
They were worried about people attacking him.
Absolutely. There were even credible threats against his life.
Oh, my God.
And McCracken, he saw the potential sentence Brent was facing, over 8,000 years.
That's insane.
He thought it was completely ridiculous. So he decided to take the case, to challenge that, to challenge public opinion, and to maybe even try to find some kind of justice in all of this.
Mm-hmm. So he's not doing it for the money.
No, not at all. And his first piece of advice to Brent was pretty blunt. Keep your foul mouth shut.
Smart move, probably.
Yeah, under the circumstances. And McCracken, he started his own investigation into the crematory, too. He brought in an expert, Chuck Crawford. And they found some really disturbing things, partially burned bodies. The crematory furnace, it was working, but it was clearly not equipped to handle the volume of, what was coming through.
Yeah.
And then they found a wood chipper.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
They were using a wood chipper.
Apparently to pulverize bones.
Oh, that's just,
yeah.
unbelievable.
Horrifying. And McCracken, being a lawyer, he started looking into the legal precedents around all of this, and he found this case from 1905 that argued that a human body isn't actually property.
Really?
Yeah, so that was going to be a key part of his defense.
Interesting.
Because if it's not property, then it's harder to prosecute someone for, mishandling it.
Right.
And from the start, McCracken's goal was to negotiate a plea deal, to avoid this long, drawn-out trial.
That would have been a media circus.
Absolutely. And amidst all of this, we have Sheila Manis.
Oh, victims' family members.
Yeah.
And her story, it's just heartbreaking.
It really is. I mean, she had already experienced so much loss in her life. Both of her parents died when she was young. And then her husband, Ira Manis, he developed Huntington's disease.
Oh, gosh.
And Ira, he had actually made arrangements for cremation.
Okay.
Back in August of the year 2000.
So before all of this happened,
Right.
and what was his reason for wanting to be cremated?
Well, he said he wanted to save space for the living.
So he was already thinking about, not being a burden,
Yeah.
even in death.
Exactly. And Sheila, she thought that his wishes had been carried out.
Right.
That he had been cremated, that his ashes had been scattered.
So when she found out about Tri-State, it must have been like this whole other level of grief.
Oh, absolutely. She was devastated and furious.
Yeah.
And she became really active in these online forums for the victims' families.
So she was like a leader in trying to get answers.
Yeah. And at one point, she had this phone call with McCracken, Brent Marsh's lawyer.
Oh, wow.
And it was really intense. She was just like yelling at him, demanding to know why.
I can only imagine.
But the thing is, during that conversation, she actually started to learn more about Brent and his family, about how close they were, about his father's illness.
So it kind of humanized him for her.
Yeah, a little bit, but that didn't take away her pain. And when she attended Brent's plea hearing, she wore all black.
Like she was going to a funeral.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And her statement to the court, it was so powerful. She talked about all these different emotions, the anger, the betrayal, the sadness, but she also talked about her resilience.
She wasn't going to let this break her.
No. And then there's this one detail that just adds this whole other layer of just like bizarreness and heartbreak.
What was that?
They found Ira's right arm a mile away from the crematory. Like it had just been dumped there.
They never found it before.
No.
So they were able to finally cremate him.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
So Brent Marsh ends up pleading guilty.
Right.
And he's sentenced to 12 years in prison.
12 years.
Yeah. And during the sentencing, the Judge Brentford, he actually said that he wouldn't force Brent to explain his actions.
He didn't want to make him talk.
No. But he did say that he hoped Brent would eventually offer some kind of explanation.
But he never did.
No.
Not really.
Not during the trial. And the families, they were just left with this huge, unanswered question. Why?
They deserved more than that.
They did. Later on, McCracken, Brent's lawyer, he put out a press release that offered a scientific explanation. He suggested that Brent might have had some kind of neurological disorder that caused like a mental fog.
So, like, he wasn't in his right mind?
Yeah, something like that. And Brent's wife, she also confirmed that he had been struggling with insomnia.
Okay.
So there were maybe some underlying issues there.
Right. And what about Brent's time in prison? What was that like?
Well, at first, he was considered a high-risk inmate, because of the nature of his crimes, but he ended up becoming a model prisoner.
Really?
Yeah, he focused on education. And he was really dedicated to his daughter, writing her letters, making sure she was taken care of.
That's good. It's me.
Yeah. And McCracken, he has said that one of his biggest regrets is that they weren't able to identify all of the remains.
Oh, right. There were so many.
Yeah. So in March of the year 2004, they held a burial for about 100 unidentified bodies.
In unmarked graves.
Yeah. And the state did put up a memorial to remember them.
Which is something.
Yeah.
But there are still so many unclaimed ashes.
178 sets.
Wow.
And they're just sitting there in unlabeled mausoleums. The coroner, he didn't really have any other options.
That's so sad.
It is. And Greg Ramey, he actually had a theory about Brent's motivations.
Okay, what was that?
He thought that Brent was just completely overwhelmed.
After his father got sick.
Yeah. He was suddenly thrust into this role.
Running the crematory.
Yeah.
And he wasn't prepared for it.
And Ramey believes that Brent just started prioritizing the immediate tasks, like getting the bodies in,
Right.
over the actual cremations.
So he wasn't like some evil mastermind.
No, Ramey didn't think so. He thought it was more like a tragic failure of responsibility.
That's a guy in over his head.
Yeah. And in a really surprising turn of events, Brent actually became a pastor after he got out of prison.
What?
Yeah.
At the New Home Baptist Church?
The very same one his great-grandfather founded.
You can't make this stuff up.
I know, and in one of his sermons, he talked about waiting for God's guidance and avoiding rash decisions.
Wow.
Which, given his past, it's pretty thought-provoking.
Yeah, very much so.
And the creators of the Noble podcast, they actually went to the church.
They met Brent?
They did, and Clara, too. And while they were there, a member of the congregation came up to them and said, "Tell the truth."
Okay.
The whole community is still haunted by this.
They need answers.
Yeah.
So coming back to the question we started with.
What do the living owe the dead?
Yeah. What do you think after learning about all of this?
It's a really heavy question.
Yeah, and there's no easy answer.
The families, they wanted their loved ones to be treated with respect and dignity.
That's the bare minimum.
Exactly. And Brent Marsh, he completely violated that.
And then there's the whole issue of the unidentified remains.
Right, all those people who couldn't be given back to their families.
It's just awful.
It is. And Sheila, she made a promise to her husband, Ira.
Right.
She wasn't going to let him be forgotten.
And the other families felt the same way.
Absolutely. They were demanding justice, demanding accountability.
And then you have the state trying to do what they can.
To recover the remains, to memorialize the victims.
But it's never enough.
No, it's never enough. And then there's McCracken, defending Brent Marsh, trying to understand him.
And Brent himself remaining silent.
Refusing to explain.
So what do the living owe the dead? I don't know. What do you think?
It's something we all have to grapple with, I guess. And the Tri-State Crematory case, it really forces us to confront that question in a really uncomfortable way.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a story that stays with you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
And please, if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe.
And let us know your thoughts in the comments.
What do you think? What do the living owe the dead?
It's a big question.
A really big one.